Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Comic Book Reviews. So this week I'll be reviewing three books. Superman number 3, um, Supergirl number 22, and Catwoman number 3. But before we get to the reviews, um, I wanna answer one of the comments I got from my last video, which was the Golden Age Superman comment reviews and commentary concerning the inconsistencies that we'll find in some of those early Golden Age Superman stories. So in that episode, I talked about the Action Comics number 2 story, where the Daily Star is not mentioned. In fact, the name of the newspaper changed. No, the newspaper where Clark Kent worked changed. And Sleepy Reader actually, said perhaps these inconsistencies had to do with the fact that maybe they didn't think Superman might last long, so there was no real long term planning or long term thinking into this whole um, continuity. But that's actually kind of an interesting question because, first of all, in the Golden Age, there really wasn't that much of what we might see as long term planning the way we see it in comics today, where every aspect of a comic these days is planned. The writer has the storyline planned out, his entire run probably planned out. What stories that writer wants to tell. We got the arcs. We've got like every story has to be a very important story, and usually those stories are, of course, done through story arcs, while in the Golden Age you really had more of a standalone story. All of the you had 13 pages to have a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and usually they never really build up to anything big. Each story told its story, and the closest thing to continuity was maintaining the formula that was established in perhaps the very first story. So there were things that were consistent. With Superman, at least the only time you kind of got some sort of continuity that was kind of tight was when you had recurring villains. So when villains would show up, you know, repeatedly, like and they weren't one-off villains. So when you saw the Joker, usually, for example, you saw him die in Batman number 1, but then he shows up again later, so they had to explain how that villain returned. Interestingly enough, and as we move on throughout the first year of Superman, there's definitely some we start to see some sort of uh much more tighter continuity. Those first stories we'll be seeing, for example, in issues 3 and 4, that the Daily Star is not really mentioned, and the actual city Metropolis isn't even named throughout those early issues. It wasn't named in Action Comics number 1, and it sort of started to get its name But yeah, we will start to see that at least for Jerry Siegel, there is a continuity. You will start seeing certain characters show up in those stories that would be recurring characters. Like for example, the mayor of the city, Metropolis, has a name and a face, and shows up in various stories. Uh, Even though the whole each issue, each story, each 13-page story within Action Comics, and then later on in Superman, have its own deal, are told in are done in one, and there are no subplots that build. There is certain consistencies there, but there's no really so much of as a long-term planning the way we understand it. And even earlier than that, we see a bit of a change in the formula, as where at the beginning uh, the stories would be very not tight. Superman would just show up and do things and then disappear, to a story where the whole thing changes, and in fact that story will would see its consequences in the following issue, and that issue would set up a new sort of status quo where Superman would become a sort of an outlaw. Before that, he was just some mysterious figure, and the stories themselves would not necessarily connect in a larger way, but certain stories uh, within the first year would begin that sort of, if not the way we see it in the modern sense, there are things that would connect uh, the stories, the stories, and so based on little events that sometimes would be referenced in the back in future issues, or when we start seeing villains like the Ultra Humanite, whose appearances would sometimes be consecutive in various issues. He would show up. Same goes for Luthor. And then, of course, you get the one off villains as well. So, I hope that answers that question. But, like, long term planning, the sense that we see it now, wasn't really a thing, and it was more of a each story tells its own thing, but there are things that would be brought when they were necessary to be brought. And you've seen a lot of Colin shows, when villains show up, you have to reference their last appearances to explain their current appearance in a story. With Superman, though, I think you really later see it like in Batman as well, where some of those earlier stories would somehow be referenced. Uh, but I will get to that when those issues come up. Besides that, it's a special day. It's Batman Day. I'm not participating in Batman Day. In my shop, actually, it's got sales. In they got 50% off in Batman back issues and graphic novels and trade paperbacks. But really, I really don't feel like going out today. Going to the shop. If not, I wouldn't have gone to the shop on Wednesday to pick up my new books. But also because the festivities for the Mexican independence are starting. So tonight, we go through the whole ceremony of remembering when the Miguel Hidalgo called upon the people to rebel against the Spanish government and start independence. And tomorrow we have a military parade, which has been traditional for uh, ever. And the fact that we have a military parade doesn't necessarily mean that we'll see. Usually, when these parades really show off the work that the Mexican armed forces do, which mostly it's rescue uh, work. Yeah, they have to do some policing right now with some of the drug infested cities and states that the police can do their job because they're corrupt. So they send the army, they send the marines, they send the navy, but usually the most that they do really is support in rescue mission due to earthquakes or hurricanes, flooding. They do some amazing work on that front, and so that's usually what's highlighted. The importance of their work in the defense of our country, of Mexico, usually through more of rescue and support on that. The army actually has plans for the rescuing and handling of emergencies, usually through natural phenomena. And then of course there's a more policing, securing the borders, or usually the fight against the drug war, which is ridiculous. But anyways, I'm actually extending myself. So let's get going with the book. So first off, Superman number 3. This is, of course, as you've noticed, I am actually picking up the Mac covers, uh, which I really love. This is an interesting homage to Superman number 1 cover, by the way. So, anyways, this story, Superman's still dealing with the imbalance that having the Earth inside the Phantom Zone is causing. So there's still a lot of disturbances going on the Earth. We learned that the Earth being in the Phantom Zone, and whatever the Phantom Zone is made of, is affecting what little atmosphere the Earth has. So it's actually poisoning people. So we see Batman and Flash are totally out of it. The story actually opens up with Livewire showing up at Star Labs, which we learn are the ones that accidentally sent the Earth to the Phantom Zone while they were doing some routine work mapping out the Phantom Zone, something that is a very routine that nothing like this has ever happened before. But now we find that they somehow did this for some unknown reason of why it went in. Uh, as Superman is trying to sort of handle all of the emergencies, because the Justice League is really out of it. We see like Batman, is passed out, and the Flash is in a hospital. All these disturbances, Superman is the only one who's able to do it. Uh, Trying to save as many people as he can, even stopping some people looting. which he succeeds. I mean, he just shows up and tells him to cut it out. It's a really fun sequence here, which I'm trying to find. Do, 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 Here we go. There's a bunch of people, looting, and then Superman just tells them to, stop it, just cut it out, and they go like, okay, you know, like, okay, we're gonna do it at the same time, and then, the Justice League, is still around. So we get a whole bunch of guest appearances. We got the two blue beetle. We got the two Atoms. We got Ted Cord as well, trying to figure it out, trying to figure out what it is. The Manhunter is there. The Manhunter is there as well. Just trying to figure out how to save the Earth, how to take it out of the zone. Meanwhile, Regal Zor comes in contact with one of the more infamous residents of the Phantom Zone, Jax Ur, and Regal Zor is able to convince Jax Ur to join him in his fight against Superman. And so pretty much the issue ends with Regal Zor and a whole bunch of people of the inmates of the Phantom Zone just heading towards Earth. We actually get, so it's a really great story. I mean, it moves fast in the fact that we know now how, well, not exactly how, but what was the cause for the Earth being sent into the Phantom Zone. But at the same time, it's sort of, I think it's trying out a bit. The whole thing is, the emergencies, like, have the issue just Superman handling all of these emergencies, while you get these little moments with the Justice League, of Justice League as an annex, the other members, the Adams, both Ray Palmer and Brian Joy, trying to find answers to these things, how they can save the Earth, how to take it out. We know that something that the people at Strauss Lab did caused it, but they didn't know exactly how. So we got like one half of this just Superman dealing with this emergency, and having his all of the members of the league and their associates trying to figure out how they can get the Earth out. But at the same time, we got Superman handling a bunch of emergencies because of this as the Earth seems to be in a really bad situation. Plus, then we have the whole Rogol Zar doing his war on Superman as well. But we do get this little funny little sequence where, after I believe somebody asked, I don't know who, somebody asked if the Earth is inside a phantom zone, what happened to the space, where Earth used to be. So we kind of get our answer here with Adam Strange showing up, and just showing up. We got this like satellite here, and he shows up, and we get this little like fun. This day like he's outside where Earth's supposed to be, and he sort of goes. You know, he came all the way from Brian, like right. You can see the dialogue here. This guys, hey, it's Adam Strange all the way from Bran. He just looks down and said like it's not funny, like it's just it's a weird sequence. It's funny in a sense that he feels like yeah. Aquaman actually asks what happened if Earth in the Phantom Zone. What happened to the space where Earth is to be, and then we get like the answer like it's not there, and but I'm like he's being punked or something. So within this intense story, we get these like funny moments, these lighter moments, with Adam Strange, and of course with Superman stopping people with the looting. But so it's a fun story, because we get to see Superman doing Superman things like handling all of these emergencies, and we see that Raul Zar is building up his war against Superman, which seems to continue next issue. This big battle. So I assume that next issue we're going to have this huge battle. So it's gonna be like all, but it's gonna be a much more action heavy story. But at the same time, because this is going to be like a year, even though we get part of the answer, it's sort of the thing it's dragging out as to how Superman and the Justice League and everybody is going to survive this. It seems like it's gonna that at least the solution to this problem will be dragging for the next few issues, while still having to deal with Superman having to deal with Ragul Zar. I assume that. Oops. I assume though that the events in this in Superman might actually just be very brief, considering that the chemical reaction between the Earth's atmosphere and the chemical the components of the Phantom Zone uh, are poisoning people, that it might in a larger scale of continuity, it might actually just be a few days. So if you kind of thinking, for me at least, who I read both books, so in I usually tend to think in big. So how does the story in Action Comics fit into uh, what's going on in the story in Action Comics? How the story in Superman sort of fits into that? Because it's clear here that Lewis hasn't shown up, but she does show up in action. So how does each of these stories fit into the larger context? And seeing that this might actually just take perhaps a few days between what happened, between I guess Man of Steel and the first issue of Action Comics 1001. This might fit somewhere there, because you really couldn't this thing couldn't take way too long because it's an emergency, obviously, and so I guess it sort of takes in between there. But anyways, if you're just reading one or the other book by itself, you get your story in Action Comics. You get it can be enjoyed by itself. Each issue, Superman as a series can be enjoyed by itself, and Action Comics can be enjoyed by itself. But someone like me who reads both books sometimes, really wonder how uh, it fits in the larger picture. So I assume it does take place between Man of Steel and Action 1001. It doesn't really matter. Next up, Supergirl number 22. This is the color variant, and the reason why I picked this up, like the previous issue, this was the only cover I saw at the shop. Didn't see the main cover, but no, I like it just the same. I mean, with crypto there. So basically, the story in this issue, as we know, Supergirl decided to go to space to find more information on Ragolzar and the truth about the destruction of Krypton. So her first stop is Mogo and the Green Lantern Corps, because they do possess the knowledge of the entire galaxy, universe, compact millennia. So she decides to go there. Um, so basically, she is there, and uh, pretty much, she comes to the meets the Green Lantern Corps, who are very helpful. She starts to learn things about Ragozar's axe as well. It seems to have certain reactions to it. But mainly the big revelation comes at the end, where basically Supergirl learns about Ali Apsa, and the fact that he belonged to this group called the Circle, which we learned about last issue, but this is where Supergirl learns about it, and the terrible things they did, specifically what happened to Krypton. Uh, so the very second issue, we've got more information. Well, we don't really get more information, but the character Supergirl gets this huge revelation, which you read Man of Steel. It's not really new. If you skip that part, if you skip Man of Steel and you pick up this issue, it might be a surprise, but of the circle of what Rebel did. Did Rebel destroy Krypton? Seems to be confirmed here in at the very in this issue at the very end. So I don't think nothing exciting really happened in this book. It's fun, uh, but basically just uh, you know nothing major. I don't think, at least as a entertaining story, it's great, uh, but nothing really major that happened. It's enjoyable. I enjoyed it for the fact that Supergirl's interacting with the Green Lantern again. Uh, she hadn't really kind of contact with them for a while. Not since like the whole Red Lantern thing, which I don't even like to remember because I thought that was awful. In fact, when I first read this issue, I was like, how does she know the Green Lanterns? And then I remember, oh yeah, the whole Red Daughter Lantern thing, which I didn't really like or think it was a necessary thing. But it's a fun issue. I mean, but if you're looking like big action or big adventure, or it's not really there. It's just the fun story with Supergirl instructing with the Green Lanterns. I mean, the art is great though. I mean, I really love this little here we go with little scene here with where is it? Yeah, with Crypto sleeping. Kind of reminded me of my dog. When she was alive, and all the funny positions she had when she slept. Uh, but yeah, pretty much. I think the only thing was the secret about how the axe reacts. But nothing that was like wow, what a big whoa moment. Just a fun issue. That's it. I mean, by the way, though, the art by Maguire is wonderful. That I really love the art as well. The writing is good as well. I have to say, we really get the captions really sort of give us great insight on what's going on in Kara's head as she's reacting to the as she's talking to the Green Lanterns, whether it's John or Kyle or anybody else. We sort of get this sort of inner monologue of what she's really thinking. If she says something, some of the unspoken things are said in the captions. So it's good for, I guess, for character development as well. But like I said, just a fun little story. Nothing like it. Catwoman number 3. So this one's a bit of a revelation. Now this is something an issue that does have a lot of revelation. So last issue, Selena actually ended up going with the to be supported by the powerful Creel family, and she learned that okay, wants to know why they sent a bunch of women dressed like her and why they're framing her for crimes and killing cops and everything. So they really come out and saying, no, we run the place, and they sort of threaten Selena. Either they saying, you either get out of our way and leave, or if you want to stay, you have to work for us. And Selena says, I'm not really interested in what you do. You go ahead and do whatever you do, while I'm here basically for my own reasons, but I really don't want to do anything with you, which is an unacceptable answer. And they got a bunch of we get this sort of this whole family, which is pretty much older people, sort of put on this sort of drugs, right? I don't know what the hell. And you know she she ends up fighting them. So we get this sort of pages of a fight sequence. Ends up crashing in a car, barely made it alive, but made it. And we learn the origin of the villain, the main villain, which is the first lady of of the the first lady of the state, I guess. Her, right? And so the thing is, last issue, the governor said he was stepping down because he had cancer. So of course, that meant whatever this man had planned now can't do it because she'd be losing her seat of power. And we do learn her origin. So she was basically some some girl, homeless. I don't know. She wasn't really living the best life. So some minister and her family and his family took her in, and she basically killed the minister's daughters, uh, framed the wife for the murder of her daughters, and married that guy. Then she killed him, and then when to get his fortune, uh, and then she basically does the same thing and begins to kill the her current one, the governor. Uh, the governor, because he is no longer useful to her. She's gonna get what she can get from him now that he dies. Um, Meanwhile, Catwoman goes and visits her sister at the very end here. So we have, of course, Joel Jones on the art, with actually artist Fernando Blanco doing the sequence here, the flashback sequence to the origin. So so it looks different from it's like a flashback, right? So different style to show the difference. Uh, but again, I think the writing though it's getting better as we get in the captions we get the made up version of the of her origin story as she is telling her to her husband, while the art actually shows us the truth, the true version of it, you know uh, which is great. And I really love when we get this sort of juxtaposition of what is and what isn't in the writing. I mean, as a reader, you get to see both versions of the story. Excuse me. So yeah, so we do get an origin story, while at the same time, uh, the story, the main story for Catwoman, is also moving forward, because she's there for totally different reasons. Not necessarily have to do anything with what happened, in the Batman 50, but some other reason that it's not very clear yet, but it's getting there as well. So packed issue as well. Big revelations, well, for the readers, the character, the in for the character as well, and seeing that Catwoman doesn't really care, or Susan doesn't really care what's going on in the town. It's not her business. She came for different reasons, but being who she is, of course, really, really sort of seems that this family, um, uh, at least the sons, which are actually from the woman's first marriage, um, not from her marriage to a governor. Have a lot of things going on in the town, as well as one thing I forgot to mention is that just as she's about to kill him, uh, right at the very end, she does confess about how she set up the whole corrupt system that's supposed to sort of help him, maybe, you know to so we see that she's a very cold-hearted woman who basically just set up this entire system to gain power, and she does it through you know all this whole system that not even the husband was aware of, and we see she's trying to kill him, but I don't think we see the actual death, if there ever was one, as we move to the Catwoman story portion of the story. But I'm really enjoying this story, this series, actually, this story. Uh, it it does feel completely different. It reads different. It's not, to this point, it's not like traditional superhero comics. It has a very different feel to it, and the coloring by Laura Aldred, gives it even a completely different feel to it as well. Um, so yeah, it's a great series. So it's this one was a very long episode. So I'll end it. I'll end it here. So next week we I have one book, so I'll leave it that for the end of. So I'll leave that at for two. So I have one book only, so that will be doubled with my next new books probably coming out the week after. So expect a retro review where I will be talking reviewing Superman number 650. Hopefully I can get another Golden Age video as well, where I'll review a story from Action Comics number 3. It's a fun story, and there is a more modern story that is similar in plot that I will be comparing it to, from, and when I mean more recent, I mean like around 20 years ago. Uh, but it sort of touches similar themes, and it's a really great way to contrast how you know the stories from the Golden Age really are somewhat treated differently from a more modern take on the same idea. So I'll probably add that one as well before the month ends. Um, so yeah, until next time, keep smiling.